Hello, and welcome to Grant's Tech World. Recently, a lot of tech news sources have noted that there's been sort of a recession in the price of graphics cards and other computer components. And what I mean by this is that up until maybe like a month ago, prices for graphics cards, new and used, were well above MSRP. But recently, they've been dropping to where you can find really good deals on really sought after mid to mid-high range cards. You know, things like RX 580s and other similar spec cards that were used for mining. And so these cards are becoming increasingly available as used listings on sites like eBay. And so you might be asking yourself, could I get in on the action? And the answer is, yeah, probably. The only not up to par thing about these cards is that usually they're a little older, obviously, and their thermals aren't as good. But this can all be fixed with a quick reapplication of thermal paste. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to do that in both CPUs and GPUs, which GPUs kind of being the focus of the video. And then we'll get into how much difference does it make, and should you attempt it as well. Welcome to Grant's Tech World. I hope you enjoy. So before we get into this video, I'd just like to say you should really proceed with caution. Obviously, not every listing on eBay is going to be as it says it is. So you might find graphics cards that are way overused and simply just don't work anymore. And I accept no responsibility if you waste your time and money. As well as that, you're not guaranteed results. Because, and I'll explain this later and you'll see in the video, there wasn't really a big point to doing this on my particular GPU. I didn't gain anything, and so your results may vary. Obviously, with lower wattage cards, you aren't going to need as much cooling, but you also might need it if it's gotten to the point where it's too bad. And the last thing I want to mention is that I accept no responsibility for people damaging their devices. Obviously, there is a risk associated with this, and I'll explain this later. Doing this literally voids your warranty. You're not supposed to do this, but it is a necessity for some people. And so, tread with caution, but I do advise doing this if your system is a little older. So now I'm going to show you clips of me attempting this process. They're a little weird. I've tried to cut out the parts that aren't super necessary and voice over some of the parts that can be skipped, and so I do hope you enjoy. I'll see you at the end of the video. Okay, so obviously the first step, if you have your card inside the PC, is to take it out. But after that, the first thing you want to do is lay it face down, so I have the fan side down, and you want to remove the screws. So one thing I will warn you is that doing this probably will void your warranty. As you can see on this screw here, there's a little sticker over it. I broke that. It voided my warranty. It doesn't really matter because I don't have a warranty on this card because it's so old, but it does mean that if you have a newer card and you want to reapply thermal paste, that might be an issue. The reason I'm wearing gloves is because I don't want to touch anything on here and cause it to, I don't know, get oil and short circuit. Once you have all the screws removed, mine had 2 here and 4 here. You may also have to remove some along the back plate here, but that shouldn't be an issue because these are attached to the PCB and the cooler is not attached to the PCB. So the cooler is underneath, this is the back plate. Once you have those removed, you'll lift it up and you'll see, oh boy, that's some crusty looking thermal paste. You'll also notice a few other things. As you can see here, so we have heat pipes going here. Right here we have the die. This is all power delivery stuff. Obviously this is all your ports and stuff. And this purple thing here is a thermal pad. So this is actually what presses up against these and these to keep them cool. But we're not going to be messing with that right now, so we'll just look at the die. This is the actual GPU. All this stuff is memory, all that stuff's power delivery. This is the GPU itself. This is where the thermal paste is applied. You can see where it left marks because here's the end of the die, and then you can kind of see how it spilled out over here. So we want to replace this because this stuff is literally no longer liquid. It'll still conduct heat, but it won't conduct heat very well. So I'm going to clean off the PCB and get it ready for new thermal paste. And how I'm going to do that is using some rubbing alcohol. Ideally, you want the percentage to be higher because that means it has less water content. This is the only stuff I could find in my house, however. So we'll get this thing cleaned up and then I'll show you how to reapply your thermal paste. Alright, now this is a disclaimer, what I show in this video. I'll confirm that it does work, or else I won't put this video up. But I've actually never done this before. I've just only seen other people do it. But I understand the concept. So this is your thermal paste right here. I got some MX2 from Arctic.
This stuff is kind of like their just mid-range stuff. How I take it is, at least with the GPU, since the die is exposed, this silver thing, or not this silver thing, but the kind of clear, not transparent, super reflective thing, that's what I'm looking for. I'm stupid. The super reflective thing is the actual GPU die. This is what does all the processing. So this is the component that will get the most warm. Everything around this is just kind of to aid the die. And it does get warm, but it's not warm to the point of it necessarily needs any cooling assistance. Heat radiating up to this will cool it enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this thermal paste and apply it so that it covers the entire die. It's not a huge deal if it spills over because this stuff is non-conductive, but if you had a conductive thermal paste, that would be a bigger issue. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take off top here. I got some on my hand, that's not good. So we're just going to squeeze a bit.
Alright, so Grant from the future here. In retrospective, the amount I put on now probably would have been, I might have needed just a touch more, but that probably would have been enough. The reason is that when I pressed the cooler down, I didn't do it very hard, and so it actually probably was enough.
Cooler back on. Try to not get this all over. Get the cooler back on, kind of press it down. That might not be enough. We might need a little bit more. Okay, and again, once we torque this all the way down, then it won't be a huge deal. So now we gotta try to line up the PCB. On this card, it runs relatively cool, so it's not a massive deal if the compound application isn't perfect. Install screws into the PCB. Okay, so it's now time for me to attempt this process on the CPU. Now this I'm quite scared of because, here's the deal. With the GPU, that was my first time ever doing this process. The CPU is a lot more dire, because if I mess the CPU up, my system's done. Okay, that GPU isn't necessary because I have onboard graphics. But if I mess the CPU up, my system is dead. So I gotta do this right the first time. And we'll clean that CPU cooler off too, because it is nasty. So you'll start by taking, I unplugged the header already from the case. But then after that, you'll take out these screws. They make disgusting noises as you take them out, and you want to take them out in kind of how you take out the tires of a car, right? You want to take out in sort of a cross pattern as not to put too much pressure on one part of the CPU. And there we go. So it is successfully off. And you'll notice that my back plate fell out. Oh, that's great. Welcome to Grant messed up the first time, so he has to now re-record this. So here's the deal. At the back of your case, you'll have this thing that looks like this. This is your back plate. This goes behind your motherboard to hold your CPU cooler in. I forgot about that in the first take, and so I kind of messed up. Here's the deal. So we definitely need to reapply thermal paste. The cooler looks like that, and the CPU, you can clearly see the Ryzen logo. That's probably why I've been having such high temps this entire time. So we're gonna fix that by cleaning it up and applying a good dose of thermal paste. Of course, we don't want to apply it too much, but as well as that, you don't need to apply it to the entirety of the thermal conductor thing, because the die is in the center here. And I'm not touching it because if you touch it, you leave fingerprints and that's bad. But the die is in the center here, and that's probably why there's no thermal paste. But then along the edges, you probably want to make a cross like this. This will ensure that it spreads out and covers the area that the die is in and the other crucial components. You don't need to cover the entire heat spreader though. That's what the heat spreader is there for. So now I'm going to clean it off just like I did the other one, and we'll get to actually getting this thing up and running again and see how it performs, because I'm really interested to see if it actually performs any better. Alright, so I have the thermal compound cleaned off of both the cooler. You can see it's much shinier now. Although something to note is that this cooler came pre-applied with thermal paste when I bought it, and I'm not entirely sure if it's needed to take the thermal paste off this early. I mean, as you can see, the processor also has no marks on it. So now comes the bit I'm a little bit scared for. You see, now I have to reapply thermal paste, which isn't a huge deal on its own, right? You just put a blob on. But with a CPU, like I mentioned, it's much more dire. Like, this is literally system breaking. If I kill the CPU, then I have to get a new one, and it's going to cost me quite a bit. GPU, like I mentioned, I don't need a new one of. But I'm hoping this will also improve performance and make things run better. So let's get to applying. It looks like when they had the original thermal paste, it was just a pad sort of on here. What I want to do is I want to create an X shape here and then see if that makes any difference to thermals and stuff. So I'm going to take this, we're going to give it, this is the old Linus Tech Tips special. Give it a little bit here to here. One dot in the corners. Seems to be quite a bit. Seems like it should be enough.
Alright, so I'm not going to bore you with the details here, but basically the process is you want to insert the backplate into the little holes that you saw at the back of your motherboard. Usually it will go kind of vertically, and then you'll start tightening each screw individually just a little to get it started. Luckily, one of my screws kind of caught the threads early on, so it worked out.
They shouldn't over tighten on their own because they do have those springs, and those springs are there to keep them from over tightening. But then again, you never know. When you feel it stop, you gotta stop. That's the thing. Okay, so that one is stopped. So let's just make sure it feels secure in there. Okay, so I'm gonna actually remove it to see what our thermal compound job looks like. I do not endorse doing this. I'm not taking that off. I literally will put too much pressure on the CPU if I take that one off. I think we applied a good amount.
Okay, so what you're probably wondering is how much difference does this actually make for about $5 US and about 45 minutes of my time? Well, at least for the ZPU, a very big difference. And I realized I did say ZPU there. I meant to say CPU, my bad. But it did make a very big difference. First off, Resolve. DaVinci Resolve, the video editor, it performed usually 20 degrees lower than it previously had, which is great. And that was even in render tests, where you're pushing the CPU solid for like up to, I mean, my test was only a minute and a half-ish, but I'm sure it would stay pretty stable. I was starting to see the temps kind of like fluctuate in one area. But it dropped to 20 degrees by average, which is great. The clock speed was about 100 megahertz higher on average, and it rendered about 3% faster after the operation. In Minecraft, which is a pretty CPU-intensive game, especially with the 1.19 and 1.18 updates, I saw, again, temperature drops. This one wasn't as good. It was only 15 degrees, but it wasn't as warm to begin with. I think it went from like 80 to 65 degrees on the CPU, which is pretty good. I saw 150 to 200 megahertz boost, and the FPS boost was about 5 FPS. And it seemed a little bit more calm when I was testing it. So it seems like, yeah, it works, at least for temperatures. Performance doesn't seem that great. I mean, 100 megahertz, big deal in the 80s, but today, it's nothing, I think. Well, if you have this thermal headroom, and what I mean by headroom is we dropped 20 degrees in Resolve, you can easily bump your CPU's performance up by overclocking, which does void your warranty and is very dangerous, so proceed with caution with that. But if you overclock it, you could get it from, say, 65 degrees or 75 degrees up to 80 degrees, and then you kind of hit that happy medium where it's not super warm, but you get as much performance as you want. However, in tragedy to this video's title, the GPU is kind of where I messed up. So originally I applied too much thermal paste, and I hinted to this previously, but the issue is that it's kind of hard to fix that once you mess up. I did try a second time to scrape the thermal paste off and improve thermals, but in Blender, the first 2 times I did it were before the thermal paste application. Tablet, don't die on me. Dang it. The 2 times I did it first were before thermal paste application, and it ran okay. Temps were around 58 degrees if I remember right, and it went through both tests and they both came out the same. Reapplying thermal paste though didn't work out very well. And I know my GPU is weird with rendering in Blender, but it just didn't work. It failed all 3 times. Either had salt and pepper artifacts or completely just went white with a little bit of blue on the edge. It was weird and I didn't like it. So I wasn't able to take any real performance metrics. And in Minecraft, it was pretty much the same too. So that might be boiled down to 2 things. Number 1, I could have had a used GPU that was already rethermal pasted and was just fine. Or 2, it could have been the fact that my GPU simply just doesn't get that warm. It's about a 75 watt card. And if you have something that low, I mean, it's got a pretty beefy cooler, beefier than my CPU, which is 65 watts, and that gets a lot higher. The thing with the GPU, it doesn't get super warm, and so it might not have needed the rethermal paste. So here's what I'm going to leave you with. Only if you're uncomfortable with the temperatures on your system should you attempt this process. For me, 95 degrees in Resolve was unacceptable. I didn't like that at all. And of course there were 2 routes I could take. Try rethermal pasting for $5 or buy a whole new cooler. And I'm glad I just rethermal pasted, because 20 degrees is 20 degrees. That's quite a bit. And it's going to increase the longevity of my CPU, like I mentioned. However, with my GPU, I also mentioned this many times, it just wasn't worth it, and I shouldn't have done it. At 75 watts, it doesn't make sense. So only do it if you're confident in yourself and you know that you need it. So thank you for watching and watching me fumble with electronics. This video was kind of a weird one to make, but if you did enjoy, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and comment down below your experiences with rethermal pasting or your experiences with buying things on eBay. I want to hear what you've bought and kind of what you've been doing with your system recently. And so I also want to thank you all for the recent growth on my channel. I know 5 to 10 subscribers doesn't seem that much, but in 4 days, that's double subscribers. I mean, for me, that's kind of cool. But I thank you so much for that, and I want to see it keep up, so thank you. But I hope you enjoyed, and this has been Grant's Tech World. I'll see you in the next one.